The World Cup 2015 is already underway. It's taking place in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. The format is a 128-player knockout event, and they've just completed round 2, so we're now down to 32 players. This has attracted an incredibly strong entry, not least because of the prize money, but also the really big prize. The top 2 players in the event will qualify for the 8-player candidates tournament in 2016 that will decide who will be the challenger for Magnus Carlsen in the next World Championship match. So let me talk you through a little bit of round 2. I mean, there are so many interesting games, but I've picked one between Yuri Vovk, who's a 26-year-old grandmaster from the Ukraine, and Wei Yi, the 16-year-old Chinese superstar who many predict might well be a challenger for the world title in the future. Well, they traded blows in their match, actually, and it went to the tie-breaks, and after the rapid games it went to 2 blitz games, and this was the first of the blitz games. And normally I wouldn't be analysing blitz games, but actually I thought this one was particularly interesting, not least because it's very nice to see Wei Yi in action and his style. So Vovk has played a London system. Now this is a very pragmatic opening because you're avoiding lots of opening theory and you're playing a system. It's hard to refute this opening. So for something like Blitz, where you just want to bring your pieces into the game, then this is a reasonable choice. I mean, theoretically, this is not the refutation of the King's Indian, but very sound opening. And I like the way that Wei Yi meets it. So he's using a double fianchetto. Why not? Because it's useful to control the e4 square and also d5 sometimes. So white continues with this really solid setup. This is very popular at club level. Well, for the same reasons that I mentioned earlier. It's very pragmatic. There's no great volume of opening theory. So it's you're unlikely to be caught out. But this is a very good system that Wei Yi has employed. So he's just playing for e5, as in the King's Indian, basically. a4 from white, but white's position should not be underestimated. So first of all, he's looking to play a5. Now that's a bit annoying for black. You know, white will always have the chance to perhaps open the a file, maybe go a6 sometimes. So black really ought to deal with that. If he plays a5, then that will weaken the b5 square. Wei Yi played a6 very quickly. It seems the most logical, but it does give white some chances, as we'll see in a second. e5, okay, the normal move. Now if the bishop drops back, then after e4, then it's a bit uncomfortable for that knight for a start. But black could well use that e-pawn as a kind of spearhead for an attack on the king's side. For example, it's not unheard of to play moves like king h8, g5, rook g8, and actually go for a breakthrough with g4. Vovk played in probably the best move, exchanging off pawns. This looks very modest. You know, white even has a slight disadvantage in space now, but actually it's not that easy for black to make progress here. Probably the most sound move here is to play queen e7 and then perhaps drop the knight back, bring it round to d6 and maybe let loose with the f-pawn. But you know, white is still in the game there, very much so. I mean, perhaps you can play e4 here, or well, not immediately, but it's roughly balanced. Instead, Wei Yi pushed on straight away with e4. This is a temptation. I'm not sure in this position it's the best idea. The knight comes to a decent square, and crucially, the bishop's diagonal is opened up. But in a blitz game, it's all about moving forward and trying to seize the initiative, and this is what the Chinese player does here. But let's see. Vovk reacts very well, so he's opening lines on the queen side. Now, it's uncomfortable to maintain the position as it is for black, because there'll always be some threat at some moment to exchange on b6. Well, for example, if you play queen e7 straight away, then you can exchange and play knight c4 and actually wins that pawn. So very quickly Wei Yi closed the position, but Vovk opens it again, and now black is under pressure. You know, exchanging like this is obviously very pleasant for white with these split pawns. And you can see white pieces look absolutely wonderful. That bishop on h2 is like a sniper in, you know, the corner of some building, you know, looking out and completely safe there. So very quickly Wei Yi closed, or attempted to keep the position closed on the queen side. That buys him some time. And now white played c5. Good move. That prevents black playing c5, but also leaves that pawn somewhat stranded on b4. But it does give that square away. Queen a4. Good move from white. So if the queens are exchanged, then you can see that bishop's pressure is very nasty. That pawn will drop. Simply better for white. So Wei Yi keeps the queens on. Good move. But white takes a pawn. So white is a pawn up. Now objectively should be good for white, this position. But in a blitz game, actually over the last few moves, black might be a pawn down, but you can see he's got his pieces in very active positions. And this is a nice move, knight d7, perhaps preparing the queen to come to g5 and also the way for the f pawn as well. So here we go, f5. So Wei Yi starts to rev up on the king side. Queen a3, that means that white is now threatening c6 because the queen is protected, so c6, and that keeps everything nice and protected in the middle. So the struggle is really reaching its climax now, because white is placing his knights in the center and is ready to dive in here. So here black has nothing better than to react as actively, to play as vigorously as possible. And very interesting, Wei Yi wasn't thinking too much. He was certainly ahead on the clock here. This is a blitz game. And instinctively he just throws his pieces forward. You know, if this is taken, then of course it would open up the line of this bishop. So white plays bishop d6, and this looks pretty good. Again, Wei Yi, without hesitation, throws the queen into the attack. And now white takes on f8. It might have been better to deflect the queen with h4, but okay, in a blitz game such subtle moves are very, very hard to see. Vovk took the rook, and suddenly, now again, objectively, who knows what's going on in this position? I'm sure that white isn't worse, but in a blitz game where it's all about instinct, let's just have a look at this. Without that bishop, without a knight on f3, suddenly white's king is looking very bare, and all black's pieces are actively placed, and well, within an instant they could attack white's king. So suddenly the game is turning, the tide is turning in black's favour. Knight b6 played in a blitz game, a very tempting move to give yourself a protected passed pawn. In fact, it loses. I mean, black could actually play just bishop takes knight here, and that's already fatal. Well, Wei Yi played knight takes rook, also very strong. And after rook takes, bishop takes, and you can see that pawn is pinned. So it's gone completely. And here, well, white could struggle on in various ways, but Vovk played bishop takes pawn. But now f4, and black is just rolling through on the king side. It's the classic f-pawn push, mate threatened on g2, that's forced, and then whoop, the rook drops. Okay, it's all over now, and Wei Yi finished off very efficiently. Queen e1 check, king h2, then queen f2's mate, and bishop f1, bishop c4 also will force mate in a couple of moves. Really interesting to see how Wei Yi strove to gain the initiative there, and wasn't too fussed about material. He played so quickly. Great instinct. So that's round 2 is over. So we're now down to 32 players, and some fascinating matchups. Wei Yi is playing Arashenko from the Ukraine. Arashenko in round 2 put out Levon Aronian. That's the big upset. But most of the big names are through. But fascinating matchups. We've got Yu Yangyi, again young Chinese star, is playing against Karyakin, one of the established Russian elite players. Nakamura is playing Nippon Nishi. Again, a tough matchup for Nakamura. Nippon Nishi, very, very experienced player. Peter Leko is playing Anish Giri. I find that a fascinating matchup. In style, they're actually very similar, very, very positional, very correct in some ways. And that's not an easy one for Giri. Giri is the favourite, but not a simple one. So, well, watch out for my round 3 report. I'll be posting that in a couple of days' time. Thanks for watching.